Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the fourth and final of our Specialist Club webinars that we've been running over the last few weeks. At the end, I'll give you some information over the previous webinars that we've done. For those of you who haven't been on every one of them and wish more information on them, I'll have details on that at the end for you to look at. I'm just going to share my screen with you now. This evening's webinar is around hybrid contact lenses. Tonight, I've rather boldly called these that we're going to talk about unique hybrid contact lenses, and I hope as we go through this, you'll start to understand a little bit as to why we refer to them as unique. And we're particularly going to be looking at their use around astigmatic presbyopes and how we believe this could be one of the easiest ways of fitting an astigmatic presbyope for you going forward. So without further ado, let me get my slides to change. Here we go. So our learning objectives tonight, I don't propose to go through all of these in great detail to you. These will obviously be available when your points come through, but the gist is to understand the visual effects and the problems associated with an astigmatic presbyopic contact lens wearer, how to fit successfully hybrid lenses, and a look at the other options around how you would correct an astigmatic presbyope. So I'm going to start with a quick poll for you, really to find out what is going on out there and what you're fitting currently. So are you primarily a soft toric multifocal fitter? Are you transferring your allegiance over to EDOF designs, perhaps with some of the lower astigmatic presbyopes? Do you already fit hybrid multifocals? Do you prefer to fit monovisions in toric single vision format, of course, because we're astigmatic presbyopes, remember? Or do you prefer to fit toric distance lenses with reading glasses over the top? So if you care to cast your votes now. I'll just wait for a few more of those to come in.
Okay, Phil, we've got about 86%, so I'll close the poll.
Okay. And the result should pop up momentarily. And there we go. The soft toric multifocal option is unsurprisingly the top option there. And we'll look at why that is, because it's a perfectly valid lens to be fitting and possibly one of the easiest products for your patients to use as well. At this point, we've not got many people using EDOF design lenses to fit astigmatic presbyopes. They're not marketed as such, so it's not a great surprise, but there's certainly been quite a lot of buzz around EDOF lenses correcting levels of astigmatism and getting quite successful results. We've got a few out there who are already using hybrid multifocals. Well done, you guys. I guess I'm preaching to the converted tonight with this. Monovision, again, not a great surprise that that's still quite a popular option, especially when it comes to astigmatic presbyopes. And we've got a fair few distance toric contact lens fitters who have patients wearing reading glasses over the top. And don't forget, that could well be the patient's choice because it fits in with their lifestyle as well. So if we just move on, just want to look a little bit at astigmatism and the market opportunity it represents. Now, this data, it's in several brochures and so on, but it is quite old data. It goes back to 1999, and it postulated that 45% of the population generally, as well as the pre and post presbyopic population, have astigmatism of more than 3/4 of a diopter, and that 15% of them have astigmatism that is greater than 1 1/4 diopters of astigmatism. Now, I mean, I remember this data coming out, and it was actually brought out more around the time of fitting single vision toric lenses and trying to get us to move away from fitting thicker, soft spherical lenses to try and mask low levels of astigmatism, and to bring soft toric lenses, which were at that time starting to become very much more available and available as frequent replacement lenses, into a better arena for us in terms of being able to sell them. And I remember a few of the products at that time being very successful. Actually, one particular one that I think this data came from was from Bausch & Lomb, the Soft Lens 66. But I thought to myself, now, is that data still correct? There's no reason I could think of why it wouldn't be. Would the population have changed dramatically in the last 21 years such that that data is no longer correct? But with a little bit of digging, it's not hard to find some more up-to-date data. So this comes from the European Journal of Ophthalmology, 2013. They did a more extensive study of 582 eyes. The study showed, although it used different metrics to measure, that at 050 diopters of astigmatism, 73% of the population showed levels of astigmatism, and at 1 diopter we were looking at about just a little bit under 33%. So as there'd be a sliding scale in terms of the amount of people involved in levels of astigmatism, it kind of bears out that at 3/4 of a diopter of astigmatism we would probably be somewhere in the 40s, maybe even at 50%. And you can see that at 150, we've reached just under 13.5%. And once we start getting to higher levels of above 2 diopters of astigmatism, we're just a little bit under 7% of the population. So that is almost 1 in 10 patients have a level of astigmatism that exceeds 2 diopters. You can also see from this study that the majority of the patients, a little bit more than 50% of them, in fact, showed with the rule astigmatism, which is great for us because that is our easiest patient to be dealing with. But it also showed that there was a little bit under 20% that have oblique astigmatism, which can cause us problems. Further on, and slightly more up to date again, this is from the Contact Lens and Anterior Eye from October 2018. Now, this was a much more extensive study. This study was actually not about measuring levels of astigmatism. It was to look at the coverage of frequent replacement soft contact lenses for astigmatism to see how well that market was being catered for. But the data in it is quite useful for what we're looking at now. So the patient cohort was a little bit over 100,000 people, so it's a very extensive study. And what it showed was that almost 90% of the population within this study showed some level of astigmatism in at least one eye. 41% of this population had a cylinder of at least 3/4 of a diopter. So it is bearing out that more than 40% level. They also showed that 6% had astigmatism of 275 or higher. So there was still coming back to not quite 1 in 10, but we're starting to look at seeing decent numbers of people that we need to think about who have a slightly higher level of astigmatism. So just to summarize that data, we know now that 40 to 50% of our patients have got astigmatism above 3/4 of a diopter, and that around 15% of them have got a little bit more from 1 1/4 diopters upwards. We also know that more than 6% of them have got higher levels of astigmatism. Now, it's generally recognised that from 3/4 of a diopter and upwards, it starts to have an impact on the visual quality for these patients. And visual quality is one of the main reasons for dropout in contact lens wear. It's been long postulated that physical discomfort is the main reason for dropout. It undoubtedly is, but visual discomfort often leads to physical discomfort for some obvious reasons that, you know, if your vision's constantly blurry, you're uncomfortable, that starts to annoy you and you physically become annoyed and uncomfortable with it. But also with toric patients, they potentially start to fiddle with the lenses a bit more to try and get vision better, which will of course lead to physical discomfort. And after a period of time, they possibly think, well, what's the point? Because I can't see awfully well, I might as well stop spending the money on these. So we need to find ways of dealing with that visual discomfort. So I have a question for you, which will bring up another poll in just a moment. Before we do launch that poll, I just want to think about this. I've given you scant information, really, because you don't know much about this eye, except that it's uncomplicated and there's no problems with it. They're just slightly myopic and they've got a bit of astigmatism. So, Nick, if you'd, oh, actually, I can show you the poll questions. It's really a question of what would you fit? Would you stay with the soft, thank you, Nick, soft toric, daily or frequent replacement? This falls within the ranges of many, many products. Would you, as a routine, start to think about fitting some sort of corneal rigid gas permeable lens to this? Would you immediately think of a hybrid lens? Or are you somebody who generally uses a wider variety of things and so would use all of the above depending on the patient's situation? So again, if you'd cast your votes as to what you would genuinely first choice use for this sort of patient.
We're at 75. I'll just let a few more vote. 78. Okay, I'll close the poll in 3, 2, 1.
And as we would expect to see, the vast majority of people would use a soft toric frequent replacement or daily disposable contact lens for this patient. And why wouldn't you? It's a fairly straightforward prescription on the face of it. But there are a couple of considerations with this prescription. If I just pull the slide back up for you, and so, why have you frozen? There we go. So, if we think about this prescription that we're seeing before us, I obviously typed this prescription into this presentation and I chose it for a couple of reasons, really. One of them is obviously, and many of you have picked up on it, the problematic axis direction. It's oblique for a start, and it's also got a 5-degree increment in it. And most of those soft lens options that you are going to choose don't come in 5-degree steps. They come in 10-degree steps, if indeed they cover this prescription, because some of the products out there, when you start to get to the higher levels of astigmatism, only go with the rule or against the rule. They don't have a full array of oblique. There are a good number now appearing that do, but a lot won't. The other issue with this is the sphere-sill ratio, and this passes a lot of people by. So this patient has nearly double the amount of astigmatism to their spherical element of their prescription. So to them, the most important part of their prescription and the bit they're going to notice the most if it isn't functioning fully is the astigmatism. Of course, they'll notice if you don't give them the correct amount of sphere, but the thing that will annoy them the most is the fluctuation potentially they're going to get from a higher level of astigmatism than the spherical elements of this prescription. And then we pose the question, as this is about astigmatic presbyopes, what do we do when we've got this patient who has the same distance prescription and they've now become presbyopic? So we've got the potential that they might be annoyed by a slight fluctuation in their vision caused by the level of astigmatism in comparison to the spherical elements of the lens, and we are now thinking about giving them an ad which could add another level of ghosting caused by the lenses. So I've got another poll for you now. So this is a slightly more complicated but perfectly healthy myopic eye who now has a little bit more sphere than SIL, but has quite a high SIL. I've been kinder to you. It's more with the rule, not completely, but closer to it. And they're a presbyope, and they've got a 175 ad. So again, we're going to ask the same question, but with slight differences, because the toric is now an XR multifocal, and I've opened it up to any kind of rigid lens you like, hybrid lenses, of course, there. Or again, if you are somebody who would fit a wide variety of products, please tell us that you do.
Okay, we've reached 87%, so I think I will close the poll now. Oh, a couple more.
Now this time, the soft lenses, although they came out top, they didn't do quite as well. Once we start to get a little bit more complicated, we start to see a few more of alternative products coming into play. Rigid lenses being the biggest player, and hybrid lenses. All of the above, of course, is including all of those options as well. So let's look at our various options. Get my computer to start functioning. There we go. So soft multifocal options. Soft multifocals, what makes them good? Certainly for low levels of astigmatism, you have a wide range of options available to you. And of course, it's important that we use dailies, 2 weeklies, monthlies. And these are going to be very successful contact lenses and probably very much demanded by your patients who want convenience. And we have also, when we start to push the levels of astigmatism, the custom-made lenses, as you are very aware. But what causes us issues with these lenses? Well, ghosting. Ghosting can be caused at a couple of different levels. So the ghosting, if the sill is not completely correct, can be caused by the astigmatism. But it can also be caused by the simultaneous vision effect of a multifocal contact lens. But it is difficult to know which it is if you're getting issues, and you may struggle to find out what it exactly is the patient is struggling with. Adapting to a simultaneous vision lens is difficult if you haven't got the sharpest of vision. Hang on, get my computer to go again. There we go. Tolerances to higher levels of sills in soft contact lenses. Now, what I mean by this is the tolerances of manufacturing. This isn't about patient tolerance. This is about the requirements of accuracy in the manufacture of soft contact lenses. And the tolerance for production of higher sills is the same as for lower sills. And there is a tolerance of 5 degrees. So you could have a patient who is very successful in one set of perhaps custom-made lenses, and the next set maybe have the axis at a slightly different direction, which of course the patient is going to notice. And that's why sometimes a patient complains about perhaps 1-3 month supply of lenses that they're not getting on with as well as the previous ones. And of course, we all know that vision can be variable on a day-to-day basis, and this is very much driven by what the patient does in their lenses, what the environmental conditions that they're in are, even down to weather changes and things like that. This was a study of 400 toric soft contact lens wearers, and it makes for quite interesting reading when you start to dig down into the detail of what people actually feel about their toric contact lenses. So 76% report experiencing issues with their lenses, and they were given the option to be able to describe what they felt it was, and so the bold areas give you their description, so blurred, hazy, fluctuating and unstable vision. 82% experience issues for 10 seconds at a time, and 40% said their vision issues can last for up to 30 seconds. Toric lens wearers report feeling irritated, frustrated, hindered, worried, and helpless while suffering from toric vision issues. So again, these were descriptive terms that the patients in this survey were allowed to give. 91% of toric patients who experience issues manually adjust their contact lenses. So that's not all toric lens wearers, but it's 91% of the ones who have declared they have issues. And they do that by blinking a lot, by rubbing their eyes, and by sticking their fingers into their eyes and pushing the lenses around. So not great in terms of hygiene, and in fact, given the option on this, 2/3 of them said they were worried about COVID-19 with touching their lenses. Interestingly, 73% of them were willing to pay more for their lenses if it could eliminate the vision issues they were experiencing in toric lenses. So food for thought there. Rigid lenses. Well, what makes rigid lenses good? Moderate corneal astigmatism can be fully corrected with a spherical lens. So obviously we're talking here about corneal astigmatism in this case, which does account for more than 80% of astigmatism. And we all know that we fit a rigid contact lens to that cornea. We create a tear lens, and it doesn't matter where that rigid lens rotates to, the tear lens always remains absolutely in the same place, and the patient can see clearly all the time. And it's well accepted that a rigid lens will always give better vision for a patient than a soft toric lens. It's more about the convenience, as we know. And almost all levels of astigmatism, there is very little you can't do with a rigid lens, especially when you custom make it, maybe with a toric back surface or with a bitoric design. They become extremely stable with the toric back surface mimicking the cornea. They have very little in the way of rotational issues with these lenses. But what causes us issues? Well, I guess part of our reasons for us as practitioners moving across from soft lenses, from rigid lenses into soft lenses, was partly patient adaptation to the comfort of rigid lenses. So easier for the patients, perhaps easier for us too, in terms of the coaching and teaching involved in getting a patient used to rigid lenses. Windy days, I'm sure you all know what I mean. We've probably all seen a patient who's been wearing the lenses on a windy day, had a little bit of grit go under there, and we've all seen a lovely zigzag pattern across the cornea when we stained them with fluorescein. And arguably a more comprehensive care system. These lenses are usually kept a bit longer, so normally the patients require more in the way of a care system to look after these lenses. Centration can be a challenge for higher sills, especially oblique astigmatism. Sometimes these lenses, when they drop following blink, they'll rotate round the oblique astigmatism, giving the patient some slightly odd visual effects they have to cope with, especially with night vision on those cases. And night vision with a translating lens, even if it translates straight down, can give them quite spectacular visual effects. And the fact that the custom RGP lenses are pretty expensive lenses. So the hybrid multifocal option, how does this compare? So what makes this a good idea? Well, with a hybrid lens, you can correct up to 6 diopters of corneal astigmatism. It will be fully corrected. The hybrid lenses use aspheric surfaces on both front and back, but they're still, in essence, trapping a tear lens under there, which means they'll correct the astigmatism in any direction, including those oblique sills, and keeping it completely consistent and stable. There's no fluctuations in the vision due to the rotation, as I've said. These days they come in super high decay materials, and they're UV absorbing. And because of that soft skirt, they feel like a soft lens from the first moment they're put in. So the patients don't have any adaptation to the comfort of a rigid lens. And they get enhanced night vision with them. And this is down to the centration of the RGP portion. When the RGP is supported by the skirt, not only is it able to cope with those high levels of corneal astigmatism without it causing a misfit, and you wouldn't normally be able to fit a spherical standard RGP to a high sill because it will just rock around on that flat meridian. But because this is supported by the skirt, it doesn't. It remains consistently in the right place. It sits very centrally like a soft lens would, it translates slightly on blink, just like a soft lens would, around about 0.5 millimeter of movement. And so an enlarged pupil isn't going to be clipping the edge of an optic zone of this lens because it's decentered slightly. So what causes us issues? Fragility is one of the main things that I hear when I talk to practitioners who are new to the newer generations of hybrid lenses on the market. Particularly with the synergized lenses who are sponsoring tonight, we have in this an unbreakable hyperbond, and that's a registered trademark for them, junction. So what you can see on your screen now is a picture of a duet synergized lens being stretched. And actually this was presented at the BCLA, the international conference, back in 2017 as a poster by Dr. Trin Do et al. And they tested 300 duet lenses, stretching them to their full potential until they broke. Now, the ruler you can see on the side is that's actually a centimetre ruler you can see beside them. On average, these lenses stretch to 300% of their original size before breakage and could take 7.5 newtons of force before breakage, and all broke where the clamp holds the silicon hydrogel skirt, not at the junction between the two materials. They had a zero failure. So what is a hyperbond junction, apart from a bit of marketing speak? Well, part of it comes down to the materials that these lenses are made of. So they use proprietary RGP material and silicon hydrogel materials for the central part of the lens and the skirt. And the wording there describes it all to you, but it's a covalent bond that joins the two materials at a molecular level by an electron transfer. And it's these shared electrons that form the glue that sticks it together. In essence, what they're saying is there is no glue. It, if you like, creates a third material that is silicon at one side of it and RGP at the other, and in between is this in-between material. But once it is together, it can never come apart. So these things are not fragile anymore. That is a hangover from the past. Again, another thing that is said to me is that, well, you're fitting several different things, so they're complicated to fit. Well, not again these days, they're empirically fitted. You've got two different types of material, so potentially you would think it might have a complex care. Well, the answer is no. You think of it as a soft lens because the silicon hydrogel skirt would not like RGP solutions, but RGPs are fine with soft lens solutions, and using standard soft contact lens solutions with this lens is fine. And difficult to handle? Well, again, no. These lenses are removed very like a soft contact lens. So in terms of your patient base, who's suitable to be wearing a hybrid multifocal lens? Well, it's your corneal astigmats, as I've already said, up to 6 diopters. These lenses come with high decay materials that are UV absorbing. And they feel like a soft lens from first insertion, so your patients haven't got to adapt to them. They are available in the normal simultaneous vision progressive lenses that you will be familiar with. They come in both a center distance design and a center near design, but they're now also available as extended depth of focus design lenses. And in the particular case of the ones we're going to be looking at, these are the Brian Holden Vision Institute design, and I'll touch a little bit about that as we go through it. And who would you avoid with hybrid lenses? Well, obviously lenticular astigmatism. These patients we're looking at are corneal astigmats. And again, patients who ultimately just want convenience. So you will stay with your normal options for those patients for the ultimate inconvenience. So what have you got? Well, the Duet Progressive has a center near and a center distance design, as I've said to you. The center near is a well tried and tested product. This has been round for getting on for 12 years now. It has 3 add powers, as you would expect. A lot of multifocals have this, a +1, a 175 and a 250 add. The center distance design lens has what is described as flex optics. This is a completely configurable lens and is quite different in the format of which it's used. Again, this is empirically fitted, so you don't have to worry about all of these details that you can have, but you can configure that center distance optic zone in 0.1 millimeter steps from 1.8 to 4 millimeters in diameter. And it has an add power range of +0.75 right through to +5 in 0.25 steps. This lens obviously has further applications than just presbyopia, but it is only CE marked for presbyopia. And it in fact won the Optician Awards Contact Lens Product of the Year in 2019. And then this is sort of hot off the press. Some of you may have come across this. This was launched in September of this year. The Synergize ID lens, ID standing for individual design, is the new EDOF design multifocal lens. Now, in actual fact, this comes in single vision as well as this multifocal design, but we're more focused on the multifocal design this evening. The Brian Holden Vision Institute design, to create the EDOF technology you have, they use a non-monotonic and aperiodic design to generate the area of extended depth of focus. Now, what that means is that it's non-zonal, so it doesn't have discrete zones that you would be perhaps used to in a conventional concentric ring design that may have 1 or 2 zones on it. And also the power profiles across those various zones aren't regular. They vary as they go across the zones. The effect that it creates and the way they control higher order aberrations with it is to condense the light into an area of extended depth of focus within the eye. And then obviously with correct fitting, you would position that area of extended depth of focus such that the patient can see at any distance from infinity down to a near point. Because of the rigid nature of the center of this lens, it allows Synergize to use wavefront technology to verify the powers of this, because the material itself, it doesn't change its shape, its format, its size, its dimensions under hydration or dehydration in wear. You can be very sure of the power profiles are exactly as they should be. And in point of fact, during manufacture, they measure the data every 40 microns across the lens surface. And in terms of this lens and its individual design that we were talking about, well, what's different about it? Well, what's changed is the optic zone size has got much larger. So again, night vision perhaps where you might have issues with a patient is going to be even less of a problem, but it's now a monocurve design. And that monocurve design allows a better weight distribution for this product to potentially improve comfort and fit. And also the accuracy of manufacture is increased such that they can make this back optic zone radius of this lens in 100th millimeter increments rather than tenths or perhaps 500ths that you've seen on RGPs. The skirt design on this lens has changed as well. This now uses a linear design skirt. In the pictures you can see the traditional skirt curve relates to past products. It's still a very valid skirt design. It is designed to lift the junction between the two materials away from the cornea, so that although we're really clever at making things, or we think we are, at a cellular level, a join between two materials is still rough enough to perhaps cause some cellular disruption. So it's important to keep that junction away from the cornea, which was done with a raised area on the soft skirt. But in order to do that, they had to have a reverse geometry in the RGP, which decreased the optic zone of that lens. With the new linear skirt design, the linear skirt, as you reach the junction area, is creating that clearance for the junction, which has meant the RGP part of it can have an optic zone that goes all the way out to that junction, giving a much bigger area. But that linear skirt also rests much more easily. It is much easier for the patients to manage and remove lenses, and it can be made in many more fits. So you now have a dozen different skirt designs on this lens. But in terms of it being easy, well, it is empirically fitted. Both the Duet and the Synergize ID lens are completely empirically, and we calculate them from the base curve from the corneal curvature measurements. The lens power is simply based upon the spherical component of the spectacle RX, vertex distance obviously taken into account. And the soft skirts are calculated based on the HVID measurement of the patient. So another quick poll for you. While we're on HVID, what is your preferred method for measuring the HVID? So Nick, if you would kindly call up the poll for me. Do you measure it with a ruler? Have you a topographer that you can measure the HVID on white to white? Perhaps you have a slit lamp with a graticule, or maybe you don't, but you have a slit lamp and you use a ruler with it. Perhaps you hand hold the ruler and use a mobile phone to take a picture, or maybe you just estimate it, your experience, and you feel that's adequate for your purposes. So if you will cast your votes.
%80 have voted, so I'm going to close it. 85, 3, 2, 1.
Good, and thank you. And the results, obviously, you can see there. Ruler, probably the widest used method of measuring HVIDs, just over 50% of you with a ruler. Topographer 13%, that may be limited by the number of people who have a topographer, of course. Slit lamp and graticule, or slit lamp and ruler, a good number of people using that method, which is encouraging to see. And a few of you have started to cotton on to the handheld ruler with mobile phone picture, which is great. Now, we did do this poll the other night in the EDOF lecture that we did. And I'm pleased to say that nobody the other night was estimating, and nobody tonight is estimating as well. So if I just move on and look at why the HVID is important. HVID does affect the outcome and success of fitting hybrid contact lenses. It determines what skirt you're going to have on the contact lenses. And getting it right first time means your first fit success rate will be better and your chair time will be reduced, which is key. Now the picture you can see on there is of a nice ruler, which we will be getting some supplies of, but there are other ways. As we've already discussed, topographers, great. You can stretch a bead across and it tells you to tenths of a millimeter, hundredths of a millimeter what the HVID is. There's a slit lamp with a graticule. That's a pentacam that automatically measures it. There's that HVID ruler again. It's quite a useful tool in as much as the spacing between the 0.5 millimeters that you can see on the scale on that ruler puts the 0.1 millimeter steps 2.5 millimeters apart. So it's very easy to see straight away that that patient is a 12.3. There's no guessing with that, which is quite nice. But you can do it with a ruler. Now, this picture wasn't done with a ruler and a slit lamp. This picture was done with a ruler and a phone. So if I just pop that up, this is quite an ingenious and very simple analog. Well, it's not analog, is it? Because we're using a phone, but we're not using expensive equipment. We're using something we have with us all the time. You simply get the patient to hold the ruler in front of their eye. You move your phone upwards or downwards until the ruler sits halfway across the pupil and therefore at the maximum HVID, and take the picture. Take the picture at a decent distance so the picture is sharp, because you can then zoom in on your phone. And if we mark this for everybody's convenience, you can see we have an HVID here of 11.7 millimeters. We've got obviously 10 millimeters in the middle, we've got 0.9 to the left, and we've got 0.8 to the right. And a simple bit of maths, 11.7 millimeters. So it is a surprisingly accurate method of measuring HVID going forward. So what are the benefits for empirical ordering? Well, obviously there's no investment in fitting sets, and there's no need for trial lenses. You don't need fitting banks taking up space, and of course the time it takes to maintain those, going through them, ordering replacement lenses, etc. It should potentially reduce the number of fitting visits for the patient, and it virtually eliminates any fitting changes. Also, if there is a small adjustment to be made, typically they are prescription adjustments because of patient perception. There is nothing to stop the patient carrying on wearing the first lens until the new lens arrives, because they will still be getting pretty reasonable vision out of the first one. And it's the wow factor. So the patient puts on that first lens and they can see. Ordering in soft toric trial lenses may mean you put a lens on a patient that is for your benefit to see how the lens rotates, but actually to the patient they're fairly disappointed if it isn't working straight away and wondering whether this is going to work. So their confidence is starting to be damaged straight away. So that wow factor is quite an important benefit to empirical fitting. In terms of what you can do with these lenses, well, there's quite a wide range of parameters. As you can see here, the Duet comes in single vision format from +10 to -15, and in its progressive formats from +550 through to -10. We've already spoken about the ads available and so on. The new Synergize ID lens has the same power ranges as the Duet, but as we've already said, this lens has 12 different skirts. In terms of the multifocal design, there are what Synergize call ads, but when we look at the extended depth of focus design lenses, they don't have an ad per se, and this is a message that is being really confused as it's being put out to practitioners. Extended depth of focus lenses do not have an ad as such. These are different designs. With the Brian Holden Vision Institute design, to gain the full range of a depth of focus for different spectacle ads, you need 3 different designs. But they then in themselves do not have an ad. So apologies for the confusion that's being caused by it. But as we said before, we're now looking at being able to correct an astigmatic patient up to 6 diopters with an extended depth of focus design lens. So unique hybrid lenses that I boasted at the top, I told you I would just cover this quickly. What makes these unique lenses? Well, we've already discussed this unbreakable high bond junction. We've already talked about the soft cushion. This soft cushion is there to make ease of removal. It's to keep the junction away from the cornea, but it also creates an additional tear pump on the lenses that, as the lens is pushed in and out by the lid during a blink action, forces tears out from under the contact lens, and then they're sucked back in again as the lens lifts up after blink, which means there's a much faster tear interchange rate under these lenses. The linear skirt on the Synergize ID does a similar thing. It allows that tear interchange. It generates a little bit of pump action, but it also spreads the surface area of the skirt and allows for easier handling of the lenses for the patients. These all have a unique 2-stage plasma coat on them. These lenses are kept for 6 months, but they use standard soft lens solutions. And you may think, well, how can that be? Surely the patients need a more comprehensive cleaning system. Well, for a lot of patients, that plasma coat will keep those lenses deposit free for the 6-month life of these lenses, provided they do a good rub and rinse, of course. There will be a few who need a little bit more, but for the majority, a simple soft lens solution is the answer for them. They contain UV protection. They come in a progressive center near design. They come in a center distance design that is completely configurable. And now they also come in an extended depth of focus design as well. you have no rotational issues with them, and you get enhanced low light performance with these lenses. They also come guaranteed. So you can guarantee the fit of these lenses, and we'll exchange them and give you money back if they're not working. However, I want to talk more about the picture you can see on the screen there. This is a fluorescein picture, and incidentally it is standard fluorescein you can use with these lenses, of a well-fitting duet contact lens, which you can see is centered beautifully on this patient. It has a alignment fit with perhaps a little more fluorescein under the lens than you might see with an RGP, and obviously a bright band of fluorescein that looks like a massive amount of edge lift at the edge, and that's where the junction is. And then of course you can't see the skirt because there's it's aligned across the rest of the cornea and onto the sclera. Now, when these lenses are fitted in practice, practitioners routinely like to see them with fluorescein under them. And you can. There is absolutely no problem in doing so. However, I wonder how many of us can actually tell if we change that picture to one that was 0.1 flatter or 0.1 steeper, if we could really tell the difference in the fluorescein picture, and if we could tell that it was 0.1 and what we need to change. However, I guess a lot of people feel more comfortable with that as they are looking at an RGP on eye. But you would also be looking automatically, I guess, at, is the lens binding? Is it moving properly? Does it perhaps decenter? Is it sitting too low? And these factors will also start to give you clues as to how it's fitting, along with an over refraction. Bearing in mind, this lens will have been empirically ordered and should be right. So if you have a lens that is perhaps binding centrally and so could be slightly flat, and additionally to that you get a plus 0.50 over refraction, you can be pretty sure that it's 0.1 flat and that you need to steepen it by 0.1. Whether you put fluorescein in to back that up or not is completely up to you, but we're postulating that perhaps you don't have to if you don't wish to. So that's it for the CET part of the lecture this evening. We'll go take some questions in a moment. As I said to you, we've done a series of webinars under the banner of the Specialist Club. Nick put the Specialist Club together a few years back, and we ran a few meetings when we could all get together, which was lovely, and do a lot of hands-on work of, you know, unusual things we don't get to do every day. And we felt it was moot to sort of put together these webinars. They were things we already had in the bag, if you like, that we could put out there for people who maybe were interested or perhaps just needed the CET points. I hope it's the former. And these are available as recordings. So the first one was myopia management with daily disposable lenses, to give you a feel for how, if you're not already doing myopia management, you might want to get started with perhaps an unlicensed product that is arguably the easiest way to get going. So there's recordings available for that. New Frontiers was a webinar Nick did on, as you can see there, on dry eye treatments and therapies. There's a recording available for that. Last week we did the how to fit extended depth of focus lenses. I did that with my colleague Beth Ralph, and we looked at a lot of her myopic patients that she has fitted with various different extended depth of focus products, and the successes she's had with that. And of course, tonight's one will also become available shortly once it's all been uploaded. Now, anybody who is registered tonight will automatically receive an emailed link to that recording. So should you wish to go through this all again, you can. If you were on any of those other lectures, you will of course already had a link for those. If you didn't for any reason get that link, you can email info@positiveimpact.co.uk and they'll be only too happy to share that link with you. And for any of you on tonight who perhaps missed one of those webinars and wished you'd seen it and wished to catch up with it, again, if you email info@positiveimpact.co.uk, you can get a link to go and watch one of those webinars. and I believe there's other resources in there as well that you can join. So thank you for your attention. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can see you properly again. And we should now have us on screen. There we go. Do we have any questions, Nick?
Not many, and I'm aware that we have 10 minutes to fill in order to hit the 1 hour requirement for CET. So there's a thank you Phil comment that's come in. There is one question from Jula who asks about, which isn't really a CET question, but it is a question. It's a good point in as far as obviously not everybody's able to fit a full range of different types of contact lenses because the business that they work in prohibits that. So the question is there a list of practitioners in London who fit these? In order to make a referral, should a practitioner not be able to access the products themselves?
Well, I suppose the simple answer to that is yes. Positive Impact will know who is fitting hybrid lenses routinely, and so just making contact with Positive Impact on that email address, info@positiveimpact.co.uk, will give you access to that. You can give a location, and the guys at Positive Impact will happily look up accounts that they know fit the products that you're thinking about here.
The good news is there's a few questions coming in now, so we panic over.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to ask you, Phil, there has been other options, hybrid options in the marketplace. Where are we currently with? You spoke a lot, obviously, about the Synergized product. What else is there out there? And also, how do they vary for fitting if they're still available? Do we know that?
So there was a wider range available to you, and isn't anymore. The only other easily available product for you out there is the Elements from Number 7. Now, Number 7 have quite a different philosophy with fitting their lenses. They base the fit upon an RGP fit. And again, they're happy to do that empirically with regular fits. So they'll fundamentally give you an RGP fit and tailor it to have a skirt on it. The Elements lens has, off the top of my head, 5 different skirts, but only very subtle differences between them. It differs in as much as it's a monocurve design, so the whole lens itself is one monocurve right across, so it doesn't have the lift at the junction that the Synergized lens has been careful to include in there, which aids, as I've said, with tear interchange and with lens removal. And the bonding process that they use is a slightly different process. It does involve glue. They bond 2 materials in a different format, so they're this is a bit nerdy, I'm afraid, but the Synergized lenses are made by having a cylinder of RGP with a donut of silicon hydrogel around it that, as we've already said, is covalently bonded together at a molecular level, and then they cut a lens out of it, so you end up with a rigid lens in the middle and a soft lens at the edge. The material for the Elements lens comes from LCS Laboratoire in France, and I believe is manufactured. It's a Contact material that it's made from. And LCS make a range of lenses called Hybrid. I've been very clever with the name there. And they don't distribute that into the UK. They used to through Cantor and Nissel, but they no longer distribute that product. Elements buy it in as a material, and Number 7 then surface it to their requirements. So you can have it in those 2 formats. The material themselves is a disc of RGP with a disc of silicon bonded together, and then they cut their lens out of it. So the junction on it is a horizontal junction instead of a vertical junction, and it is done with some sort of bonding process, some physical sticking property bonds the two materials together, which I don't know because they keep that very close to their chests, of course, at LCS Laboratoire. So yes, there is an alternative, and the Elements one, the main, I would say, the main advantage to the Elements one, that for any of you who've got a lenticular astigmatic patient, is they will work a toric front surface on it, which we do not do. So you can deal with a lenticular astigmatic patient, and I believe they still make it in a multifocal format.
Phil Joyce asked a question that dovetails nicely into what you've just talked about. Are there different RGP materials available?
The Synergise one is its own proprietary RGP material, and it is required because of that bonding process. The molecular structure of that RGP was designed such that it forms a molecular structure that matches the silicon hydrogel so that they can interlock and produce this covalent bond. So no, we don't change the RGP materials.
And similarly, the French one is a standard material. They create.
One material.
It's a Contomat button with a fixed RGP center and a fixed silicon hydrogel skirt. So no, you can't play around with that. As you can imagine, if you were trying to play around with that, you would have problems with the junctions. Elaine Lucas, hi Elaine. What level of astigmatism would you go for with a hybrid over a daily EDOF lens?
That's an interesting question, because technically by the fitting guide of the EDOF lenses, they correct up to 1 diopter of astigmatism, and a lot of you out there, Elaine, I know, especially out there, knows that you can, for some patients, correct quite significantly more in terms of the astigmatism. Now, that won't necessarily work for all patients, so you have to approach that with perhaps a little bit of caution, a bit of trial and error. There has been reported some great success with EDOF design lenses and higher levels of astigmatism. As a rule of thumb, it is usually more with the rule and with a good sphere-sill ratio. By that I mean much more sphere than sill. Although not always. I've come across some where they're almost equal. So for convenience, you would probably go, and most patients would want to go with, a daily disposable, and it makes sense. And whether it's an EDOF or whether it's a soft toric design lens, there are very, very good products out there that would be your first choice, and the polls sort of exhibited that. It's more, I suppose, about putting something into your armory of products that you use that is easily accessible to you, you're familiar with, and that you can easily fit, that will solve perhaps some of your problem patients, and perhaps some of the patients where you might have, with trepidation, ordered an XR range soft lens, knowing that, well, it's going to be hit or miss and it's going to cost me a lot of money. So it's kind of thinking of them more as a product that fits into your portfolio, into your armory of what you use to deal with your astigmatic patients and, of course, your presbyopic astigmatic patients. And I'm sure, Nick, you'll bear this out with me. Normally, with a contact lens manufacturer, they produce their first lens is a spherical lens, and then they might go on to produce torics, and then eventually a multifocal appears, and that becomes their lesser product of the amount they sell across the board. Well, for us, it's the other way round. We sell more of our multifocal products than our EDOF product, which is just coming online, than our single vision one in this sector. Of course, Synergise covers the irregular sector as well, so you have to extract that data because those lenses are a very different kettle of fish and for a very different purpose.
Is the Synergise lens removed ID lens removed by this normal pinching method?
Yeah, so it's pinched at the bottom like a soft lens. If anything, it's slightly easier than the Duet because of the thinner design of the skirt. And that because there are more skirts, you're less likely to have one that's erring on the tighter side of acceptable. So it is a pinch. It is done. I think the key things with the pinch, and again, this is more of a practitioner hang up, I think, from the past than a patient one. Patients have no frame of reference. So if you teach a patient what to do and they do it, then they're quite happy. I generally have more trouble teaching practitioners the first time they handle hybrid lenses to remove them because they've got themselves het up that they're not going to be able to get them out. And they're actually really straightforward. It's just a dry finger and thumb. It's a pinch at the bottom of the lens, just like you would any other soft contact lens. It's a firmer pinch, that's all. And dry fingers are key because they're slippery little devils with that plasma coat on the surface of them.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks to Michael Burwell for that question. What are the most common reasons lenses are exchanged or adjusted, Phil?
The most common exchange on a new empirical fit, I would say, is probably a slight alteration to the power. In terms of everything looks good fit-wise, but the patient perhaps wants to enhance the near or the distance according to what it is with the multifocal lenses, and so we alter the power slightly to try and compensate for where they might be struggling personally. Although in theory, the powers we've sent are what conform to their spectacle lenses. Of course, in practice, we all know patients don't necessarily like that in their contact lenses, and they need an alteration on that basis. So that's probably the most common change. In terms of a fit change, then it is the physical change of the fit of the RGP by one step either way, because it is just slightly too flat or slightly too steep. Calibrate your topographers, people. Skirts are probably the least common change. They have the least effect, and practitioners often make the mistake of trying to change the skirt to alter the fit, and actually it's the RGP you alter to alter the fit.
Phil, thanks, Phil. Phil Joyce asks, preferred solution for plasma coating. Some others seem to be sensitive to solution types.
The plasma coat is, again, it's a unique thing for Synergise. It's this two-stage plasma coat that they patented. And it doesn't seem to be affected by any of the multi-purpose solutions more than another. And certainly there's been no evidence brought forward that that's the case. So the plasma coat seems to successfully last a 6-month life of the lens because of the two-stage nature of it. We have seen, and I don't know how many of you are using peroxide systems. Peroxide systems are very occasionally with them cause some sort of reaction at the junction that makes the junction go very slightly grainy looking. It isn't enough to cause a problem, and it's been thoroughly tested. It doesn't cause any structural issue. It doesn't change the oxygen transmissibility, and it doesn't happen all the time. So the research went further, and it found that it's actually some sort of reaction between the peroxide system and the patient's tears and the junction. So it doesn't happen to everybody. But I would say probably 95, maybe more percent of our practitioners probably use MPS solutions with it, and I haven't come across any issues with any particular MPS solutions with the lenses and the plasma coat.
Thank you. A couple of kind of related questions from Mira Suda and Jude Edwards. Jude's quite keen to fit the lenses, and so by the looks of it is Mira, she's messaged us retraining actually for myopia management rather than hybrids per se, keen to get going. I'm not aware of your message coming in, so somewhere along the line it's missed, Mira, so please do contact us or call the office. Jude's question kind of relating to fitting generally hybrid lenses is percentage of success rate. which I'm not sure if you covered. She apologises if you did.
No, I didn't. And I could have put in all that data, but then it just becomes a bit too weighted towards the synergized products. So because there's a very little hybrid information out there, it becomes very difficult not just to talk about one particular product. So, but in terms of that data, the newest data, of course, is on the Synergize ID. It's just launched in the UK. It launched at the beginning of the year. The launch event was GSLS in America in January. And Synergize did quite extensive early access work with practitioners with it, and did a survey on 1,500 eyes. Didn't survey the eyes, of course, so 750 patients, presumably. And the success rate, first fit success rate with the new Synergize ID lens was 84%. So the first lens is ordered. And bear in mind the criteria for these practitioners was that they had to conform to the fitting guide and they had to do accurate HVIDs and things like that to be part of the program. So that obviously will help success rates. But 84% first lens on eye success rate, 90% were within 1 or 2 lenses. And there was only a 6% rejection rate in terms of whatever the reasoning was, whether that was handling or feeling or vision with an EDOF lens, whatever it was. We don't know the figures on that, but only 6% dropped out over that 750 patients. So it had a very high success rate on the first fit. The data we keep on the more historic products like Duet, we know we also hit around about 85% in terms of first lens success rate with the Duet lens. So the new lens is pretty much up to the same as the lens we've had around for a long time.
Okay. Can you remind us, Vivian Starr? Hi, Vivian. What's the DK of the rigid lens bit?
130. So
Yep.
RGP 130 DK, the silicon hydrogel skirt is 84 DK.
Elaine wants to know what the plant is over your shoulder. It's great.
There's actually 3 of them, Elaine. They have great big trumpety flowers on them, and the name has just completely left my head. Amaryllis, there you go, came back.
What? Okay.
Amaryllis. They look completely like they're not going to grow. You buy them as a large bulb in the garden centre, and you have to plant them up. And they've been in those pots for 3 weeks, and they're 3 foot high now, and they're about to flower.
They're about to hit the ceiling by the looks of it. Jude says, thanks, that's a very good rate indeed. Actually, to that point, sorry, because I was looking at questions and stuff, did you make the point around the accuracy of the HVID being the kind of crucial metric?
Well, I think I laboured it in during the talk, but
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
if you want to labour it again, because I think it's important. That success rate is very dependent on measuring horizontal visible iris diameter to 0.1 of a millimetre.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example, and this is a real life one, and I won't mention any names, no names, no pack drill, but this practitioner should have known a lot better. But they ordered an ID. They were part of our, we've been running an early access program in the UK as well, and we hope to have all that data at some point for everybody. But they were part of that group, and they sent through an ID EDOF order to me. And an HVID of 10.5 right and left, which made me suspicious because A, it was 0.5 millimetre and it was the same right and left. And this particular practitioner had sent me the Ks as a screenshot of their topographer, but they hadn't done the HVID on the topographer. So I politely contacted them to check that this HVID was 10.5 mil and exactly the same right and left. And suggested that perhaps they did it on the topographer to find out what it was on the topographer. There was no means of me being able to measure it from a screenshot. Yeah, it turned out it was 11.41 and 11.22. not 10.5. So the right eye was almost a millimetre out in terms of the HVID. Now that may not sound like a massive amount to you guys, but that's 4 steps of skirt, a millimetre. So that'd be 4 skirts wrong, and it would be 4 skirts too flat. So the likelihood is it would flute, it would flap in the breeze, the lens would probably decenter horribly, and the patient would be horribly uncomfortable. And if they weren't put off by the comfort of the lens and therefore decided not to go ahead, if that practitioner had come to me and said, I'm seeing a bit of fluting and the patient's a bit uncomfortable, I'd have gone, well, we just need to steepen the skirt and we'll do it by 2 steps because that's a standard change. But it still wouldn't have solved the problem because the skirt would still be 2 steps too flat. So the HVID is crucial as part of the fit. It has always been so. We've been able to get away with a bit more with the earlier products with 3 skirts. And the guarantee when somebody gets it slightly wrong and you end up with a medium instead of a flat, and then we just have to change it at the follow-up. But it would be much nicer if we didn't have to change it at the follow-up. From a cost point of view for us, of course, but from your point of view, how the patient is with that. You're spending money on chair time, so there's a cost implication to you, but also it can damage the patient's confidence in terms of the product. It could damage the patient's confidence in you. Whereas if, bear in mind, these patients have probably tried a lot of different things and maybe from elsewhere, and they've come to you because they've been recommended maybe. And then you do something magical to them that puts a pair of lenses on their eye that they can see with straight away, that's comfortable straight away, and they've never had that. They are just going to shout from the treetops or rooftops even about you. So just bear that in mind. That simple little bit of quick accuracy at the beginning can save you an awful lot of time and pain down the road.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a question around cost, which I'll come to right at the end. Caroline President, hi Caroline. For a new fitting, would you err on a longer or shorter time between the patient taking the lenses home and their first aftercare?
A longer or shorter time between take home a new patient to them?
So yeah, the first aftercare appointment, is it?
Yeah.
Let's just say
I treat them any differently than any other patient, to be honest. There's no reason to treat them differently from any other patient. At the end of the day, it's a high DK contact lens. So in essence, it needs looking at just as much as any other contact lens does. So I think probably just the same as you normally do, Caroline.
To that point, what do you recommend on a wearing time build-up?
With them, again, it's a little bit patient dependent, but with high oxygen supply products these days, we are perhaps a little bit less precise about build-up wear times that we were when we first fitted lenses which were lower DK to try and get them used to them. And perhaps again, when we looked at RGPs as a lens itself, we tended to sort of get them to wear them for sort of 2 hours on the first day and increasing by 1 or 2 hours a day depending on the patient, just to get them used to the tolerance of it. Well, there's no tolerance to get used to. The lens will feel or not feel like anything to them in as much as it will feel like a soft lens to them when they've got it on eye. They don't particularly feel it. It's not as unnoticeable as a super thin, very low powered daily disposable lens, of course. But once it's on and under those lids, then there is no reason for them to feel an edge. So they won't be aware of the junction between the two materials. They won't feel the RGP. So their wearing time build-up can be quite quick. There is no reason not to. The oxygen supply is very, very good through it. And I think a lot of patients who are comfortable will probably exceed the wearing time schedule that you set anyway. So
possibly the final question is a couple of thank you very much. One from Mira, one from Gabriella, who goes on to say a very interesting lecture there you are, Phil. What kind of costs are we looking at for the patient per month for these lenses? Do you want me to address that, or are you happy to address that?
I'm happy to. You can add anything you like if you like. I mean, I had this very question today actually from a practitioner who emailed into the office to say, how much should I charge for them? And we don't set an RRP. We give you a cost price for them. In terms of the cost price for these lenses, they are to you about the same price as 6 months supply of premium daily disposable multifocal contact lenses. So although it's only one pair of lenses and not 180 pairs of lenses, it gives you perhaps
good for the environment, Phil. Good for the environment.
Yeah, it'd be much better for the environment. Yeah. It perhaps gives you a better feeling as to what if you were going to do it on a direct debit basis, what your monthly fees should be pitched at. There is obviously an upfront cost, so you might want to think about how you front load it in terms of the costs, because those first lenses will need to be covered. I've come across practitioners who treat them in a similar way to their pricing structure they do for Ortho-K. So again, a front-loaded cost with perhaps a bigger front-loaded cost and a lower direct debit monthly. Some will split it the other way. So it is really down to you. But if that gives you a feeling of where the price sits, it's about the same as premium daily disposable multifocal lenses.
Personally, I wouldn't recommend going down the, well, if you're an Ortho-K practitioner, I might offend you now, but I do think some of the pricing for Ortho-K is frankly unrealistic, and is precluding greater entry to such a fantastic product option for patients because of affordability. You know, for me, it's, if you're happy with the margins you're making on a premium multifocal and the product is costing the same, why wouldn't you price it the same as a premium multifocal daily disposable option? So that will be my view. There is no justification. There's not a significant amount more chair time with the empirical fitting to justify a lot of additional cost in practice, in fees. But at the end of the day, everyone's entitled to charge what they want to charge. If you can get one customer who'll pay you £1 million, then you don't need to see many more patients, and you charge what you think is justifiable in your market with your patient base. But as a general rule, yeah, premium multifocal pricing that you'll already have in your business is probably the sort of thing that you need to be charging for these on a 6 monthly replacement basis. And I think we've run out of questions. So
I was just one more comment on the pricing, Nick, because there's another way of looking at this that may make some of you feel a little bit uncomfortable initially, but bear in mind these lenses are not available on the internet. They're not something they're going to be able to buy off the shelf all over the place. So they're not going to walk away from you and go and get them somewhere else by ordering the packets they've taken home, that kind of affair. So in actual fact, you could probably more, and they'll be stunned by the vision, so they're going to want to keep coming back for them. So they're not going to drop off your radar too easily. So that front upload doesn't have to be that high. And I know a lot of places will charge a 3-month fee initially for, daily disposables that they collect 3 monthly, but a similar sort of thing could be done, because even if they did disappear, you've still washed your face, but you'll have a more saleable product and probably get more penetration by, as Nick was saying, not front loading things too much.
I mean, the only caveat to that is that most manufacturers of more specialist type products, certainly the 2 hybrid companies we've talked about tonight, will offer a guaranteed fit on the first set, which comes at a slight premium, but that gives you the peace of mind that that lens, as I say, if you empirically fit it and give the manufacturer accurate data, you'll get a very high first fit success. You may still need, hopefully you'll have a lens that the patient can wear, and a slight tweak in power, as Phil says, is the most likely scenario. Might come down the line, but at least you can make that tweak without it costing you another set of lenses. But of course, once you've got that patient happy and settled, the price of the replacement lenses, which don't come with warranty because you don't need it, certainly for the next probably 12, 18, 24 months are at a lower cost as well. So you just need to bear that, you bear that in mind. So that will be a justification for your skill and experience, plus the extra cost for a guaranteed fit initially might give them a slightly higher cost than a daily disposable multifocal perhaps, but over a monthly basis after that you would be looking at a very similar charge. So I'm aware that there are no more questions, and so just takes us to say thank you very much for your attendance. You'll get a link to a video. If there's anything you wanted just to cover off again, you can skip through to the relevant bits of the video and hear it all over again later. There will be a feedback questionnaire when you close the webinar. If you haven't got the time to do it now because you're probably getting a bit peckish for your eating, then there'll be a link to that from the email that you get with the link to the video. And please do that. We need to do it as part of our CAT compliance as much as understanding what worked for you and what didn't work so well for you. Please be open and honest. That's and candid. That we appreciate that and we want that. So and finally, there's a couple of handouts here that you can get, and also will be available from us if you forget to pick them up after this webinar, both on Duet and the Synergize ID product. So it's thank you from me.
And thank you from me. That's the 2 Ronnie sketch done.
And yeah, I guess this is the last one before the holidays. So as well as saying thank you, have a great Christmas break, and wish you all a successful and healthy new year. Take care now. Bye.
Thanks very much, everybody.